Yeah, that's what it is.
Yes.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you so much. I wish I knew if everyone could hear me. Can you text your contact, Andrea, and make sure everyone has the audio? In the meantime, I'll get started. I know everybody wants to get out of here by probably 12:50, if not, right? Not taking all the way up to the last minute. So that's fine. We can do that. I appreciate being invited back. Some of you may remember me from a while ago. My name's Nicole Wolf. I'm from Lenape Valley Foundation. Was it a year ago, maybe ish?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. I came and talked about trauma and supporting people in the aftermath of trauma. And so Andrea invited me back to talk about what I consider probably one of the most important topics that I think we undervalue a lot, which is stress management and work-life balance. I do this training under a variety of different names, right? In the mental health field, people ask me to do training on self-care, right? I'm a person that I feel like during COVID, everybody talked about self-care, right? Make sure you're taking care of yourself. And it became this phrase that a lot of people roll their eyes at. And so I no longer call it self-care, whatever you want to call it though. Whether if self-care feels good for you, call it self-care. If stress management sits better with you, call it stress management. If work-life balance seems to, I don't know, fit your style, call it work-life balance. They're all the same thing. It's all taking responsibility for your own wellness, right? No one will ever do that for you, right? And stress keeps coming in our lives. So how do we make sure that we manage it in a way that we don't get burned out? So just as a quick reminder, my name is Nicole Wolf. I'm the Director of Education and Training for Lenape Valley Foundation. I've been there for almost 20 years. And for the first 15 of those years, I worked in the crisis service, which was a pretty high-paced, high-intensity program, right? People were coming in because they were an immediate danger to themselves or others. And we had to come up with safety plans and sometimes manage involuntary commitments, right? People who didn't even want to be there. We had to manage that. So, and I became a supervisor in that program. So I quickly saw how the stress of that role for some people became really overwhelming. For some people, it didn't. I loved it. I had colleagues that loved it. I thrived in that environment, right? Other people thrived in that environment. Some folks really did not. And what I started to see was that there were some commonalities there. There were people who didn't really use time off very well, didn't do those like back to basics things, which we'll get to in a few minutes, about really just valuing your own wellness, right? And that there's multiple aspects of wellness. All right, so with that, what we'll cover in our short time together here today is just to kind of put this in perspective of how important this is. There's a lot of research on how stress affects us physically, right? So even if you don't buy into the mental and emotional wellness side of this and the cognitive wellness side of this, the physical wellness side of it sits with most people. So we'll go over a little bit of all of that high level stuff. I'm not going to get into nitty gritty. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end or give you you'll have my contact information if you have more in-depth questions, but we're going to do kind of a high level overview. And that we'll also highlight the importance of that this is an active process that we have to make time for in our lives. We're not going to wake up one day and suddenly start, I don't know, just being well and doing good things for ourselves, right? We have to make a commitment and write it down and stick to it and build habits, right? It's an active and proactive and ongoing process. And with that, I'm never a fan of training that just gives information without usable practical things that you could do, right? In fact, as we're going through this, think about, because I'll ask you at the end, what's one thing you're going to do today for yourself, for your own wellness? So think about, as we're going through this, what really speaks to you, something that you can do, right? All right, so this, it's a prayer. I know it's a prayer, right? But I don't want to lean too far into the spiritual or religious side of things. So whether it's God or Allah or universe or whatever, the point is this, a lot of people are familiar with this serenity prayer, right? Give me the serenity to accept what I can't change, the courage to change what I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? That's really important when it comes to understanding stress, because we have zero control over how our body responds to stress. It's genetic, it's physiological, it's been that way since the beginning of humans, right? Even animals have similar responses to stress or to threats. We have no control over what happens in our body when we get stressed. So we need to know what it is we can't control. We do have control, though, over doing things to mitigate what that stress does to our body, right? What those physiological changes do to our body. And so we have to know the difference and have the wisdom and have the know what we need to do, right? So what we do have control over and what we don't have control over. So we'll start with serenity, right? We do not have control over what happens physically to us. When stress enters our world, right? This goes back to like caveman times, saber-toothed tigers attacking man. And what happens? Their adrenaline, known as epinephrine in a the hormone word, their cortisol. You've probably seen a ton on social media about cortisol response lately, right? Epinephrine and cortisol are the stress hormones in our body. They are protective for us. They make us act when there's a threat in our environment, right? They're life preserving. So we have no control. That happens. That's been genetically just engineered in us for our entire existence as humans. It has all these great benefits, right? Epinephrine and cortisol. They increase our situational awareness, so we know to run away from threats instead of toward threats. They give us a burst of energy. And let's get away from the saber-tooth tiger. Let's talk about a regular stressor, right? Something awful, some family emergency happens, right? You get the phone call that something's going on at home and you need to go. What happens? You immediately can think more clearly about, I need to get out to my car. I need to make phone calls. This is what I have to do, right? We're more alert and awake and aware when stress happens. All of a sudden, we're remembering all these things we had to do. I know I can have a regular day at work and have a whole to-do list in my mind, and I forget half the things on there. But in a stressful moment, I remember everything I had to do, right? That kind of thing. Also increased strength and endurance. Back then, to fight the saber-toothed tiger. Now, to stick through it. And if we need to get somebody to the emergency room, or we need to make sure that we have to stay up late to do all the things we didn't get to do because we had to leave our job, right? All of that. It's not all bad, right? It helps us act. It's the fight, flight, or freeze response, right? And like I said, not all bad. In fact, there is a degree of stress, an amount of stress that makes us our best selves, right? If we have too little, I don't know anyone who has too little stress, right? But if we do have too little going on in our world that doesn't get us, excited or anxious. Anxious can be used in a positive way or a negative way, right? It's about how we think about it. Then we get bored and we stagnate as humans, and life just doesn't seem exciting. It might, some people to the far extreme might think it isn't worth it.
Bless you.
Right?
Thank you.
On the high end, certainly we can get anxious and overwhelmed, right? Easily. And this line, right? This sort of like optimal amount of stress is different for everyone. There's lots of analogies about stress, right? You've heard my cup is full or overflowing, right? My bucket. I like the analogy of a backpack, right? We all have our stress backpack that we can carry reasonably, right? What's funny about the stress backpack is that it's a different size for everyone, right? And you've met people that have different size stress backpacks, right? You've met the person who their stress backpack looks like one of those like giant JanSport advertising ones that you see outside of like LL Bean during back to school time, right? Some people have what seems like an unlimited capacity for managing stress. No matter what happens to them, they just seem to be able to bounce back, roll with it. It rolls off their shoulder, right? They just cope. We also know the person who the size of their backpack is like a little teeny tiny Barbie backpack, right? And anything that life throws at them, they get overwhelmed, right? It seems like they can't really handle anything because everything is a big, huge deal that they need lots of help to cope with, right? And there's all different size backpacks in between that, right? When we get to the too high end, whatever that is for our backpack's capacity, we can get overwhelmed. And we either need to know that our backpack is getting too full and it's overflowing, right? And we need to put it down for a while, or maybe we need to like empty it out a little bit to see what it is. Maybe we need someone to help carry it for us for a little while. We need to talk to somebody about what's going on and get the stress out, right? Or we need to just take some time away, like put the backpack down is like take some time away. When was the last time I took a day off or a vacation or connected with somebody that I actually enjoy spending time with, right? I like that analogy because I think it fits. So we need to know where our optimal backpack capacity is, and we need to know when it's getting too much, too full, or overflowing. So what happens to us, that same epinephrine and cortisol that has good effects that we need during times of high stress, when they get dumped into our brain and body either too frequently or like big stressful events, right? This can happen with multiple small stressful events or one or two big stressors. But the point is, when our body and brain are flooded with this too often or too much, that positive starts to turn negative, and it really starts to have an impact on our physical bodily symptoms, to the point in our time frame. I didn't have time to hand this out, but I will share this website so that anybody can go on and find this. These two researchers, Drs. Holmes and Ray, they did a whole bunch of research on stress, and they created this inventory that anyone can do. And it's very simple because it's one page and it's just a list of a whole bunch of different life events and experiences. And the idea is you think back on the past year, from the time you're doing it to a year back. If you have experienced any one of these life situations, then you, hold on. My mouse. Oh, well. If you've experienced it, you circle it, and each event has a score, right? Some of the events include dismissal from work, marriage, divorce, vacation, moving, right? They're not all negative events, right? But even positive events have stress along with them, right? And so there's a scoring at the bottom, and it says if you add up the scores of all the different events you've experienced over the past year, and if you have a score within a certain range, you have like a 50% higher chance of having a stress-induced physical health emergency. Physical health emergency, stroke, heart attack, right? These things. If you get even a higher score, it's broken down into 3 categories. If you get even a higher score, it bounces it up to 80%. And they did years of research with people who had those physical health events. They looked back into their history and what did they go through? What were the stressful events they went through? So, like I said, even if you don't buy into this is good for your mental wellness, right, and your clarity, at the very least, please understand that this is for your physical wellness and your longevity and like keep your heart working, right? Keep your circulatory system working, right? Because these hormones, they wear on our bodily systems. That's what happens, right? When your blood pressure and breathing and heart rate are constantly being elevated way beyond normal, that where there's wear and tear then on your bodily systems. And then all that good stuff starts turning into bad stuff, right? We can start to be hypervigilant when we don't need to be, right? Those good things last way beyond when the threat has exited or the stress has exited. It starts to have a negative impact on our memory. And instead of being more awake and alert, if we're too alert for too long, then we crash with exhaustion, right? So very, very important. So what are some of the signs that maybe our backpack is reaching the top, right? I have 2 slides with these signs. This one is when the backpack is getting to the top. It's not quite overflowing yet, but we should probably be concerned either about our own stress level and do something about it, or also what's really important is that a lot of us tend to be self-blind in these areas. So I also ask not just that you look out for these things in yourself, but in the people that you care about, right? In the people next to you. If someone is right, and a key here with all of these signs is that it's a change for the person, right? So for example, calling out of work or leaving early, coming in late, those kind of things. If that's a person who typically lived by the motto, early is on time is late, late is forgotten, right? And now they're coming in late, I'd be worried about them. But if there's somebody you know who's like barely ever gets somewhere on time, I'm less worried about that person, right? Someone being more irritable, making mistakes that are unusual for them, being indecisive, right? And in some areas, indecision can actually be dangerous, right? If it's something where like there's a dangerous thing happening and someone can't figure out how to react and they're being indecisive, that could put that person and other people in danger. Sometimes it's less so. Someone who typically had a really good sense of humor and just doesn't find the humor in things anymore. Somatic just means physical complaints, right? So sometimes people don't have emotions to say, I'm not doing well, I'm anxious, or I'm sad, or I've been pissed off all the time. Instead, they might say something like, my head hurts, my back hurts, I just don't feel good, right? I think about this with kids who don't really have well-developed emotional vocabulary, and they constantly want to stay home from school, but there's no real physical thing going on. I'd be wondering what's the stress in their life. Just as an aside from this, and I know a lot of people don't want to think kids are struggling, but they really are. The average age of onset for anxiety is 11. So if you think that your 10-year-olds and your 9-year-olds are not struggling with anxiety, I'm here to tell you, and stress, and it comes from stress, right? They're feeling stressed in a way that maybe we didn't when we were their age, right? And we have to accept that. Kids are growing up in a different world than we grew up in. Our parents had to realize that. We have to realize that too. So all of this is also for our young ones. We need to acknowledge that they're struggling too sometimes, and they need to be told that it's okay to ask for help and to take care of themselves and to make good decisions for their own wellness. And they need to hear that from the adults around them. Complaining too, right? And I know we all know that person who just complains about everything, is never happy about anything. Less worried about that person than someone who typically is happy-go-lucky, go with the flow, and now all of a sudden they're really kind of just nothing is right, nothing is good. These are just some of the things that I'd be a little worried. I would hope that if it's, you know, within myself doing these, that I would then recognize that now it's time for me to do something about this. Or if I'm noticing these things in someone else, that I would have a conversation with them and say, hey, I'm a little worried. What's going on? You seem overwhelmed, right? Let's see what's, you know, can we talk? Is there something we can do? More concerning, this I think is more, if I'm back to the backpack analogy, like the backpack is at the top, it's overflowing, right? We can barely keep control. Stress is just overwhelming. I think a person's space and self, right, are a good indicator of how well they're doing, right? So someone who typically always kind of keeps their desk neat and organized and always comes in kind of sharp, and suddenly they seem disorganized, things are scattered about, and maybe it looks as if they haven't showered in a couple of days, right? I'd be worried about that person. What's going on that even their day-to-day routine is kind of out of whack. And I'm not talking about, I do realize that there is a factor of like, there's effort to look a little sloppy now for some, that's like that's a fashion thing to like look a little sloppy. People pay extra for ripped jeans. I can't wrap my mind around that. I never could. I'm not going to pay extra for ripped jeans. So, but some people do. So again, not worried about that person, worried about the person this is different for. Someone who's starting out of the ordinary arguments. Again, we all know that person who's always looking for a debate, always looking for a fight, not as worried about them as I am the person who this is unusual for them. And especially if it gets to the extreme where they're picking arguments with the wrong people, right? Like supervisors or, you know, sensitive colleagues, right? Like they're just picking fights with the wrong people too. So out of the ordinary arguments, I worry about. Change in language to just more negative. Again, it shows that like looking for that pessimism, right? Just not everything is great. Or someone who is cursing more than usual. Again, I come from a crisis-based mental health world in emergency rooms, and I also do a lot of work with police, and I married a police officer who's also in the military. And so I'm okay with cursing, right? I'm not, whatever, that's fine. But someone who typically isn't, and suddenly they're like dropping F-bombs every other word. What's going on there, right? This is out of the ordinary for the person. I'm going to come back to cynicism in a second, but being withdrawn is like isolating, not engaging socially with people, is a symptom listed on almost every diagnosis in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Illness, right? So people who do rise to the level of meeting a mental illness diagnosis, almost all of those diagnoses indicate one of the symptoms is being withdrawn. The reason is human beings are pack animals, right? We survive and thrive in groups. And when somebody pulls away from the pack, it should clue us in that something is up. Why are they withdrawing? Why are they not engaging? Humans need belongingness. They need connection. And so when they're not connecting, we should be concerned, right? And then cynicism, like just losing our sense of like empathy, care, and concern, positive regard for each other. That's concerning for sure. And the other aspect of cynicism is that it can, even if someone's expressing it outward, like, well, what's the point? The world sucks, right? I think that is a common thought right now. Like, what is happening in the world? I think all of us have had that thought, definitely in recent moments. But what's dangerous about cynicism is it can be turned inward, right? So the world sucks. I can't do anything about it. Can be turned inward to my world sucks. And what can I can't do anything about it. I can't change. It leads to a sense of hopelessness and helplessness. And hopelessness and helplessness are the precursors to suicidal thoughts. So if someone starts to show cynical tendencies and then it starts to turn inward, I'm really worried about that person, right? If someone is saying things or doing things that make you think that there's nothing that they or anyone else can do to better their circumstances, they feel trapped in some way, I'm really worried about that person. Because a lot of people that get into that mindset end up attempting or dying by suicide, right? So very, very important to keep that in mind. All right, so now we know what to look out for, know what are the signs that you know within yourself. This does require a sense of self-reflection and self-awareness. What are the signs that I'm not doing so well, right? That my backpack is getting to the top, it's reaching its limit. And then what do we do about it, right? So always go back to, so I steal things, but I give credit where credit's due. So this concept of burnout is hard, self-care is hard, choose your heart. I stole that. I'm like on and off the Weight Watchers bandwagon my whole life. And so they're in their meeting rooms, whatever, they always have, you know, being fat is hard, being skinny is hard, choose your hard, right? So I stole that. Burnout is hard, self-care is hard, choose your hard, right? You're gonna, either way, there's an effort. Either you get burned out and life feels overwhelming, or you make an effort to take steps to be able to handle what life is going to throw at you. Because stress is going to keep coming every day, right? It is the constant in this. So what's better? And where do you start, right? Like this one too. How does a beaver build its dam? One stick at a time, right? It doesn't wake up in the morning and have a fully formed dam. It's one step at a time. It's actively building small habits over a long period of time. And we know it takes a minimum of 21 days to build a habit, right? So everything that I talk about, I know that there are some things that I'll talk about that some people will roll their eyes at, right? Oh, that's ridiculous. I can't do that. I promise. If you're not already, you will in a minute. But that just might be something that's tough for you. That doesn't mean it doesn't speak to someone else. And it doesn't mean you have to start with that one. Start with something that you know you can be successful with, right? So always start at the beginning, start back to basics. I seriously, I think of, if anyone's ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? People need food, shelter, and clothing before they can move up into like self-actualization and being great with themselves in the world. I think that's the same thing with wellness, right? If you're not doing the basic things like drinking enough water each day. I have family members that do not put anything but Pepsi into their body. We've gone on Disney World vacations and I've seen them not drink a single sip of water. And I'm like, how are your kidneys even functioning, right? Like, what is happening right now? Anyway, but seriously, what the good, basic good nutrition. I'm not saying overhaul your whole diet right away, but like, are you eating something green once a day to get those vitamins and minerals? And the lettuce on a Big Mac doesn't count, right? Like, but are you eating something green? Are you drinking some water every day? Are you moving your body just for the sake of moving your body? It doesn't have to be like, what's that crazy cult workout that people do with the ropes and the tires? Spit. Yeah, sorry if anybody does CrossFit. I want you to be insulting. But it doesn't have to be that. Like, take a walk out in the sunshine, right? Moving your body just for the sake of moving your body is also considered exercise. And regularly, it doesn't have to be every day. It can be every couple of days a week. But just the fact that you're doing something just for the sake that it's good for you can start to create a snowball effect where then you start to do other good things for you. Excess is, you know, I truly believe like everything in moderation, right? So I don't necessarily have, I do have stuff against tobacco. That's the one thing. I don't have anything against caffeine. I don't have anything against alcohol in and of themselves. In excess though, the concern is they work until they don't, and then they have a paradoxical effect, right? So you might think, oh, I need a cigarette to calm my nerves, right? Or I need to, what do they call the dip things now? We just call the dip, the what?
Zen.
Zin. Oh, Zin. Yeah. Okay. Whatever fancy name it has now. It's had other fancy names over the years.
Teenage boy.
Right. I should have known. My
Yeah.
were talking about it too, right? They have them with just caffeine now, or you can get like nicotine and whatever the hell else chemicals they put in them. They work until they don't, right? And they also have all these other negative side effects. So I don't necessarily think it's a terrible thing to have a drink every now and again, right? But when these things become the way that we cope with stress, that's when the problem comes. So I have no problem with happy hour every Friday. What I worry about is the person who is really struggling, who starts to say, all right, happy hour on Thursday and Friday. Oh, let's do happy hour on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? That to me is like, okay, what's going on? Right? And are they using alcohol to cope with things that are overwhelming? Right? Sleep is like, it's the hill I will die on. Good sleep will make you, lack of sleep will break you. Lack of sleep makes every single mental health symptom worse. Lack of sleep can make you psychotic. And I'll give you an example. If you think like, no, you're crazy, that's not true. Anybody ever stay up for 24 plus hours for whatever reason, and little things start skittering out of the corner of your eye on the ground? Like you think, oh, did I see a mouse? Did I see a bug? That's lack of sleep induced psychosis. There's no mouse. There's no bug. It's not there. It's your sleep is so important to our brain's functioning that it can make us psychotic if we don't. And it's typically the first thing we sacrifice when we're stressed. So again, steal things, but I give credit where I don't know what the original credit was. I heard it from anybody listen to Preston and Steve on 93.3, Dr. Mike. Does Dr. Mike still come on? Mm-hmm. So Dr. Mike was on a while ago, years ago, talking about sleep, and you can Google this, it's a real thing. And he talked about the 10-3-2-1-0 good habits or habits for good sleep, right? 10-3-2-1-0. Please don't throw anything at me. I didn't write this. I'm sharing this information. Don't shoot the messenger. But if you hold back judgment for a second, I think there's probably one or two things in here that you'll realize you really do have more control over than you think. So figure out whatever your bedtime is, right? Your average bedtime. 10 hours before that bedtime, no caffeine. I know. As I have my green tea loaded with caffeine right here. So I get it. That's probably the hardest one for most of us, but stay with me. 3 hours before bed, no work or intense workouts, right? So no CrossFit. Taking a walk, fine. Doing a serious intense workout or like spinning or something like that that's really intense. So 3 hours before bed, no work or intense workouts. 2 hours before bed, no food or alcohol. 1 hour before bed, no screens. Somebody read this article at some point, right? Or has been listening to Preston and Steve for as long as I have. No screens. That includes television, right? Because most of the smart TVs we have now also give off that blue light, whatever. Like read a book, do a breathing exercise, no screens. 1 hour, just 1 hour before bed. Also, I don't know about you, but on the days that I don't do this well, because I certainly don't do all of these well every day, I'm not like reading anything that's good for me on my phone when I'm scrolling in bed right before I fall asleep. I'm doom scrolling on social media and looking at nothing but trash, right? It's nothing good for me. So like, what's the point? It's not good. It's not enriching me at all. Like put the phone up. And then 0 times hit the snooze button. And if you're thinking, wait, I can get around that by setting 5 different alarms 5 minutes apart from each other in the morning, that's the same as hitting the snooze button. Sorry, we can't trick ourselves into this. The idea is you set a bedtime, you set a wake time, you stick to it, right? So A lot of times people are rolling their eyes at some of those things, but at the same time, I told you to think about what's one thing that you can do well for yourself. And for me personally, I know that when my stress gets overwhelming, I end up on my phone late at night till right before I'm in bed. I tell myself, I just have to turn my brain off. Yeah, right. That's making my brain ping all over the place, right? So sleep, sleep, sleep. If there's one thing, hold sleep sacred, get good sleep. And then connection, right? If withdrawal is a very concerning symptom that someone's not doing well, connecting with people that you enjoy spending time with is a really healing and helps manage stress. Then when stress does, that's like daily stuff to do, right? Just maintaining a balanced lifestyle to help offset. When stress does become overwhelming, there are some really important things that we can do for ourselves. I know supervisors in the room sometimes don't like when I talk about time off, but I think it's really important to take time off planfully, right? There is a huge difference between a planned vacation day, even if it's a staycation day, than a desperate calling out sick day, right? Because a desperate calling out sick day, it's a lot harder to truly disconnect from work. Because chances are you're thinking about, well, and when I say sick day, I mean like mental health sick day, right? Not a legitimate sick day. Legitimate sick days are fine, but when you call out sick, but it's really just a mental health day, chances are you're at home or whatever, and you're wondering like, oh man, who did I leave in the lurch? Who's going to get me back next week for calling out on them this week, right? And you don't really truly disconnect. You're worried about what's going on. When you take planful time off, you or your supervisors or whatever can plan for that and get your duties covered, right? And it's a lot easier to disconnect when you do that, right? Also, really tough days, weeks, moments, whatever, customer interactions, right? Customers can be difficult. In those moments, who do you debrief with? Right? Who's your go-to person, your confidant that you can say, man, that was a doozy of a customer, of a call, of a day, of a week, whatever. Who is it that you're connecting with that can relate to you, that you can get that out with? And if it's something that impacts a group of people, particularly in a work environment, right? You're here in your work environment. Are you debriefing as a group? Like, did it impact a group of people? Do we need to come together and talk about it and figure out, like, what could we learn from this? Is there something we could do different, right? Do we just need to get out our frustrations with each other? Do we need to get the facts straight? That's another important thing about debriefing is once something bad happens, the rumor mill starts, right? And the whisper down the lane. And I'm not saying it's intentional, right? But it's that telephone, right? That whisper down the lane phenomenon where each person that tells the story gets it just a little bit wrong until by the time you hear it at the end of the line, it's like not even close to the truth. Debriefing sometimes is about let's get everybody on the same page with the facts of what happened. And it's sometimes that in and of itself decreases the stress of the situation, really knowing what happened. So how are you debriefing when things are really, really stressful? Who are you debriefing with? Have a plan for that. And then in the moment, right? In a really stressful moment, if you feel like your heart is racing and you can practically feel your blood pumping faster through your veins and you're getting a little short of breath, right? And your brain's spinning, you've got racing thoughts because you know you're getting really stressed out about what's happening. There are some breathing techniques. I'm not talking about like meditation, right? I know I'm a mental health professional. I probably should meditate. I probably should like and promote meditation. I can't do it. So I don't, but there are some techniques, some breathing techniques we can learn from that and take from that can help us manage overwhelming stress in the moment to help us think better and think more clearly. So 4 square breathing is one that is taught to the military. It is a tactical breathing. When they're in combat, they're taught to do 4 square breathing to get their breathing and heart rate under control so they can think more clearly. What that looks like is Breathe in for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, breathe out for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, and repeat that 4 times. At the end of that, your blood pressure is lower, your heart rate has decreased, your breathing has become more regulated, right? You can literally stop your stress response in the moment. You could slow it down. I'll say you can't stop it, but you can slow it down in the moment, right? Another one, I know a big stressful time might not be in the moment, but for me, it's like laying in bed at night trying to fall asleep and my mind's racing over all the things I could have, should have, would have said, right, during that stressful moment. I've taught this technique to my kids. They use it when they're anxious. 4, 7, 8 breathing, right? So in for a count of 4, hold for a count of 7, out for a count of 8. There's an aspect of this, of a breathing exercise with the numbers and the counting, that is really just, if your brain is focused on the counting, it's not focused on the racing thoughts, right? So staying you can start to train your brain. And then also physiologically, when you breathe out more than you're breathing in, it calms down your body and actually can help you fall asleep. I mean, once you get really good at it, I mean, I've literally done it where after 3 times I'm out like a light. You know, it sounds like some witchcraft or something, but it is physiologically having an impact on how we are and how we're feeling. All right, again, a lot of this, I said in the beginning, requires a high level of self-awareness, self-reflection, right? Knowing what are my early warning signs? How do I know when the stress is becoming too much? How do I know when my backpack is overwhelming? And being accepting of the fact that we might not be our own best judge of when we're not doing well. So who is it that I'm going to trust that when they say, hey, what's going on? Like, you don't seem like yourself. Who am I going to accept that information from? And then, of course, looking at what are the things that push my buttons, right? Whether it's assumptions that I make about other people, different prejudices or stereotypes that I hold, biases that I hold. And I don't necessarily, I'm not talking about like social justice related things or diversity related things, but even just what are the prejudices and stereotypes that I have for myself? What are the things that I tell myself I should be doing better or other people should be doing differently? In my world, we talk a little bit, there's a whole psychological theorist that talks about the tyranny of the shoulds, right? That when we say should all the time, we create a disconnect between what our expectations are and what reality is. And it's unfair to ourselves and to the world that we do that. I have a colleague that always says, we need to stop shoulding all over ourselves and each other, right? Because we have these unrealistic expectations. So instead, recognize that we do that. We naturally do that as humans. Our brain does that for us. We make assumptions. We have expectations, sometimes unrealistic. And so the only way to stop that is to recognize that's happening and be like, hold on, stop that. Maybe I should start asking questions of myself and of others, and like what are realistic expectations for myself and for others, right? Questions rather than assumptions. But it takes self-reflection to do that. So if you're still at a loss, despite all those suggestions of what to do, or nothing seems to really speak to you about anything I mentioned in terms of self-care, I encourage you to Google, find something, right? I just went onto the internet and I Googled certain things. I know, because I'm in the mental health world, I know of this type of therapy called DBT. And I know that a big part of it is about distress tolerance, right? Tolerating distress in our lives. We're not good at it as humans, believe it or not. And so a huge part of this theory is all on self-care. So there's like well over 100. If you Google the big list of self-care activities, it's a list of over 100, right? You can find it in PDF form, whatever. When I did it, also 101 self-care activities. I Googled, because a lot of people will say, I don't have time for all that. I don't have time to do that. Well, do you have 5 minutes? Can you carve out 5 minutes to do something good for yourself? Google 5-minute self-care. So that's what I did here. 5, 10, 15 minutes. What do you have to do something, again, that doesn't have an end goal that's related to something else or related to work or whatever? The only reason you're doing this is purely for yourself, to disconnect from everything else, right? Self-care for, if you're like, oh, all right, these seem too, they're for younger people, or they're for girls, or they're for guys. Self-care for 44-year-old mom of 2 teenagers. I don't know. You'll find something, whatever it is. I really encourage you, and most importantly, write it down. We're more likely to do stuff, right? I mean, I realize my audience, but like even in the general public, I'll tell people, most people take better care of their car, right? They'll put we've got the stickers on our car for our oil changes and our inspections, right? Or we write it down on the calendar, or we put calendar reminders in our phones, right? Are we making a commitment to ourselves, right? We are so much more likely to follow through on something if we write it down. And remembering it takes 21 days to build a habit, so don't give up too soon with any one thing. Also, I tell everyone in my life, if you're trying something new, try it at least 3 times, because the first 2 times are always awkward, no matter what you're doing, whether it's a new hobby or a new exercise or a new healthy food thing that you're going to try, right? Whatever. The first couple times are usually a little weird. So try everything, even therapy. I tell people, if you're going to see a therapist, give them 3 sessions before you decide it's not for you. If after 3 sessions, you're like, I'm really just not connecting with this person, that's fine. But just don't stop before you give it a chance. All right. So stress is a part of life. Our physical response is completely automatic. There's nothing we can do about it. Managing our stress is a series of choices that we absolutely do have control over. And we have to choose every day to manage our own stress. And we have to do it actively and proactively. But it can be really simple, right? It doesn't have to be, it can be simple and enjoyable as long as we put the prep work in and the practice and we keep doing it, right? And we don't give up on it. So I said I would ask you, and I don't know if the chat will come up, but I know our folks that are at a different site today, please feel free to join. Actually, maybe I can escape out of this. First, I'll give you my contact information in case you want to take a picture of it, because of course I only have 1 business card. But then maybe I can escape out of this. Oh, yay. And I can bring up the chat, or I can even, I think I can unmute other group to tell me what are you going to do today I think you'd have to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
I can mute you, but not unmute you. So what is it? What's one thing that you're going to do for yourself today? Later, after you leave work for the day or after you leave this room, what's one thing that you're going to do for yourself?
Oh, have a beer.
Okay. 1 beer today. Right? I'm okay with that. No. What else? Drink more water. Drink more water, right? It's like one of these things that we can.
Yeah.
It's one of the easier things we can do. It's not as difficult, right? What else?
Can I take a nap in the middle of the day? Yeah.
I don't know. That's up to your mom. If you can, I recommend it. I did try. I fought really hard to get it. I shared my office. I had a big office before when I was having my kids, when I was pregnant with my kid, and I had space. And I tried really hard to convince my boss and my office mate to let us get a couch in the office so I could take a little nap in the middle of the day. I'm like, I'll be so much more productive if you just let me lay down for 10 minutes, you know? No, that doesn't work forever. I was not approved to do that. So I don't know if you will be. But do you get a break? I definitely have seen people who on their break go out to their car, listen to music, maybe doze off for 5 minutes. So It's not out of the question.
I worked with the guy, he was military, ex-military. He would spend 15 minutes eating his lunch on his toolbox, and he would spend the other 40 minutes in his car dead asleep
Yeah.
every day at lunchtime.
I love it. I love it. You see, it can be done with a little bit of thought and prep and creativity. What else?